Hello, friends. If you're curious about the movie Security 2017, you're in the perfect place. Don't forget to give this video a quick like, it really helps us out. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to stay updated on all the latest movie deep dives. Let's jump right in. It begins with a storm. Not the kind that rains from the sky, but the kind that erupts in the distance like the sharp edge of a nightmare. A child running through the darkness, blood on her knees, eyes wide with the kind of terror that never really leaves you. Somewhere, not too far away, men with guns are hunting her. Methodical. Trained. Ruthless. She isn't just running for her life. She's running with a secret. And in the crosshairs of that secret, a fortress stands waiting. Not a castle, not a government compound, but a shopping mall. A place of flickering neon, shuttered stores, vending machines humming through the silence. Long after the last customer has left, it waits in stillness. But tonight, it won't sleep. And neither will the man standing watch over it. He doesn't look like much. Unshaven, worn down, eyes carrying too many years of pain and too few nights of rest. A military jacket with the patches removed. Boots scuffed from places he doesn't talk about. He's not here to protect the mall. He's here because he has nowhere else to go. Just another name on a list of ex-soldiers passed over by systems too broken to care. But fate doesn't ask permission. He takes the job like it's just another shift. Flashlight, monitor, radio. And then she arrives, wet, terrified, screaming for help. Blood on her clothes. Behind her, the world collapses into violence. Within moments, the night spirals into chaos, and the quiet shopping mall transforms into a battleground. He doesn't hesitate. That's what makes him dangerous. Because beneath the tired expression and ragged uniform is a soldier who's been waiting, aching, for a reason to fight again. A reason that matters. And now, one has walked through the doors, dragging a nightmare behind her. The girl is no ordinary witness. She holds the key to a case that cuts to the core of corruption. The men hunting her? They aren't thugs. They're professionals. Mercenaries. Led by a figure so cold, so calculating, he doesn't just kill to silence. He kills to control. His voice is calm. His hands steady. He doesn't bark orders. He whispers them, and men obey without question. When he learns she's taken shelter in the mall, he doesn't panic. He prepares. What follows is a siege. One mall. One child. One war veteran. And a team of elite killers who know how to take a building apart piece by piece. The tension builds not with spectacle, but with precision. Cameras flicker. Power cuts. Phones go dead. The soldier gathers his new team, the handful of fellow guards working the night shift. They aren't soldiers. They're misfits. A tech guy who still lives with his mother. A middle-aged ex-cop counting days until retirement. A single mom who knows how to shoot but hasn't held a weapon since her divorce. Together, they form a ragtag crew that has no business fighting a war. But war doesn't care who's ready. He trains them. Quickly. Brutally. Using overturned food courts and toy stores as cover, they turn a place of shopping and leisure into a battlefield. Escalators become choke points. Hallways become traps. What was once harmless becomes deadly. And all the while, outside, the mercenaries prepare to breach. The first wave is silent. A power grid goes offline. Emergency lights hum to life. The mall becomes a tomb of flickering red. The enemy enters like shadows, smooth, armored, precise. But they underestimate what desperation can do to a man who's already lost everything. He moves like he's still in uniform. Every step calculated. Every shot a warning. The first invader doesn't even get a scream before hitting the floor. And just like that, the game changes. The mercenary leader smiles. He likes when the prey fights back. Because now it's personal. Inside the mall, the tension suffocates. The girl, scared and shaking, finds herself under the care of someone who understands fear, who sees in her the echo of every mission gone wrong. He promises to protect her, not because it's his job, but because it's all he has left. And she, in turn, becomes his reason. Not to kill. To survive. With each passing hour, the siege grows more intense. The guards adapt. Booby traps. Ambushes. Guerrilla tactics inside a world of mannequins and mall directories. One by one, the soldiers fall. But so do the guards. Each loss cuts deeper, slows the momentum. Trust builds. Then breaks. Arguments flare. Sacrifices are made. There's no room for heroes, only survivors. And in the heart of the chaos, the leader of the mercenaries makes his move. He speaks to the soldier through the comms. Taunting. Prodding. Trying to break him not with bullets, but with memory. He knows who he is. Knows the battles he's fought. The ones he didn't walk away from whole. He turns them all into a psychological prison, hunting the girl not with speed, but with inevitability. The final act is a spiral. Traps are sprung. Betrayals surface. The safe rooms fall. One by one, the mercenaries reach deeper into the mall's core. The soldier, bleeding and limping, continues. Driven not by adrenaline, but by resolve. A fight like this isn't new to him. But what's at stake is. Because this time, someone is watching. Someone he swore to protect. And when the final confrontation comes, when he and the leader face each other in the flickering glow of a ruined electronics store, there are no grand speeches. Just quiet hatred. The kind built over lifetimes of moral compromise. They don't fight like action heroes. They fight like men who know pain. And in the end, only one walks away. The aftermath is quiet. No medals. No recognition. Just a girl safe. A man broken, but standing. A mall ruined, but not fallen. The sun rises, and the lights come back on. Customers return to lives untouched by what happened. But for those who were there, nothing will ever be the same. Because sometimes, a place meant for selling shoes and soft pretzels becomes the last line between life and death. And sometimes, the man behind the security desk is more dangerous than any soldier on the field. You never see him coming. And when the lights go out, he's already waiting. It begins not with action, but with exhaustion. A long, lonely stretch of road snakes across the screen, its edges blurred by cold air and fading light. Somewhere along it, a man drives. His hands grip the wheel not out of tension, but habit. Eyes sharp, but not searching. He's not looking for anything. In fact, it's the opposite. He's driving to escape, something in his past, something in himself. The rhythm of the tires on cracked asphalt is the only music, and he listens to it like a lullaby he's heard too many times. This is Eddie Deacon. Former military. Current nobody. No home. No prospects. No mission. Until now. He pulls into a small town that looks as tired as he feels. Its edges are worn, the paint peeled, the neon signs flickering with the kind of reluctant life found only in forgotten corners of the country. Eddie's there for a job interview. Not much. Just overnight mall security. It's the kind of work that doesn't ask questions. The kind that doesn't need explanations for why a man who used to lead squads into war zones now just needs a paycheck and a reason to stay awake. The mall is like every other. Closed at night. Long corridors lined with glass storefronts, silent escalators, echoing food courts. A palace of consumerism gone dormant. But it's not the emptiness that feels eerie, it's the silence. The kind that seems to listen when you speak. The kind that feels just a little too still. Eddie meets the team. A small group. Rough edges. None of them soldiers. Vance, the self-important supervisor who overcompensates for the mundanity of the job by clinging to his laminated badge like it's a shield. Johnny, the twitchy tech guy, always bouncing between soda machines and security cameras, eyes flicking between screens as if waiting for something more exciting than petty shoplifters. Ruby, sharp-tongued and sharp-eyed, who seems more street-smart than security-trained. And Mason, the oldest of the bunch, a faded ex-cop with more stories than answers, who keeps to himself and smokes just outside the fire exits, as if always halfway out the door. They give Eddie the rundown. Cameras. Keys. A radio. His domain is small but sacred. The overnight watch. Keep the peace. Lock the doors. Don't sleep. Nothing happens here, they say. It never does. But they're wrong. Because out in the world, something is already moving. In the dead of night, under cover of a rainstorm, a transport convoy is ambushed. Lights flash. Tires screech. Gunfire rips through the air. But this isn't a drug bust or a political hit. It's a child. A young girl, barely 12, escapes through the chaos. She runs like she's done it before, like she's used to pain and worse. Her name is Jamie, and she's the key witness in a high-profile federal case against a man no one touches. A man whose money buries evidence and whose reach goes deeper than government files. The convoy was supposed to protect her. Instead, it left her bleeding and alone. She runs, fast and hard, until she finds shelter in the only place still open at this hour, the mall. Its lights are dimmed. Its doors locked. But the storm breaks something open. And Eddie, making rounds, hears the pounding. At first, he thinks it's a prank. Kids. Maybe someone drunk. But when he opens the side entrance and sees her, wet, terrified, bruised, he doesn't ask questions. He just lets her in. It's muscle memory. The part of him that used to protect. That used to lead. It switches on without permission. She doesn't say much at first. Just breathless fragments. Names. Numbers. The way someone trained in trauma learns to speak, fast and scared. She doesn't know who to trust. But something in Eddie's face, in his voice, keeps her from running again. She tells him about the men who are coming. About the weapons. About what she saw. And he believes her. Because sometimes you just know. Back in the control room, Johnny picks up the first signs. A car idling just beyond the camera's reach. Lights that don't move. Someone walking across the lot too slowly, as if waiting. Eddie radios Vance. The others join. At first, there's denial. It's a mall. What could possibly go wrong in a mall? Then the lights go out. Power gone. Backup lights flicker on in cold red hues. Every corridor becomes a tunnel. Every shadow feels like it might move. Phones are dead. External comms offline. And when they go to the front entrance, they find it already barricaded. Someone is locking them in. That's when Eddie takes command. He doesn't ask for permission. He just moves. Tells Ruby to secure the doors. Sends Johnny to the roof to try to reach outside. Orders Mason to lock down the loading docks. Vance argues, but it doesn't matter. The soldier in Eddie has reawakened. And as they rush through the preparations, Jamie finally speaks the name of the man they're up against. Charlie. And it stops Eddie in his tracks. Because Charlie isn't just a name. He's a myth. A ghost whispered about in military corners, in places where dirty work gets done behind polished walls. A mercenary with ties to government contracts, cartel money, arms deals buried deep. Ruthless, brilliant, always 5 steps ahead. If he's coming, it's not an accident. He knows exactly what he wants. And he'll do anything to get it. Jamie is the only thing standing between him and a full acquittal in a case that could topple empires. And she's trapped in a mall with 5 underpaid night guards. But Eddie doesn't flinch. He's fought worse odds. not with better weapons, but with conviction. Outside, Charlie's team begins their approach. Not loud, not fast, but surgical. These aren't thugs. They move like ghosts, cameras disabled, sensors tripped without alert. One by one, they breach the perimeter, testing weaknesses. A trash chute, an unsealed duct, the roof access hatch. And Eddie sees it all. He sets traps. Not perfect ones. Not military grade. But clever. Resourceful. Office chairs jammed under handles. Toy store nets rigged with knives. Paint thinner turned into fire lines. The mall becomes a war zone, reimagined. Because Eddie knows this kind of battle. It's not about strength. It's about strategy. You don't win by meeting the enemy head-on. You bleed them. Stall them. Make them wonder if you're more prepared than you are. But the first clash isn't a victory. It's brutal. One of the guards goes down. Fast. Caught between sections. No warning. Just silence, then blood. The others panic. Vance wants to run. Johnny breaks down. Ruby shakes, but stays. Eddie holds the line, but it's fraying. Because the enemy is inside now. And the mall, for all its cover and corners, is a tomb waiting to be sealed. They fall back. Regroup in the food court, using overturned tables as makeshift barricades. Eddie tends to Jamie, who hasn't cried yet. She just sits there, quiet, eyes scanning every flicker of movement. She's seen too much. He knows that look. He's worn it. Outside, Charlie speaks over the loudspeaker. Not threats. Not demands. He talks. Come. Measured. Like a teacher. Like a man explaining inevitability. He tells them he doesn't want blood. Just the girl. Walk her out, and this ends. No police. No fallout. Everyone lives. But Eddie already knows that's a lie. Because men like Charlie don't leave witnesses. And Jamie? She's more than a witness. She's a chance to do something right. So he turns off the speaker, reloads, and prepares for what's coming next. Because the worst part of war isn't the bullets. It's the waiting. And the storm hasn't even begun. The lights inside the mall flicker like a dying pulse. Somewhere in the upper rafters, a security camera swings lifelessly, its cord cut and hanging like a broken limb. Below, among scattered display racks and overturned furniture, the air is heavy, not with smoke or blood yet, but with inevitability. They all feel it. The pause before the next strike. The kind of silence you only hear in war zones, when both sides are listening, measuring, breathing. Eddie kneels beside Jamie, his hand on her shoulder. It's the only stable thing left for her. She doesn't tremble. Doesn't cry. She just stares ahead. Focused. Watching the hallways as if she expects something to crawl from them. He sees in her the same look he used to see in child soldiers during his deployments, an awareness that shouldn't belong to someone her age. A knowing. And for the first time in years, he feels protective in a way that has nothing to do with orders. But he knows protection alone won't be enough. The mall is breached. Multiple entry points. The first wave was surgical, an extraction team meant to take Jamie before anyone even knew they were inside. But they failed. And now Charlie will switch tactics. He'll play psychological games. Cut through the defenses not just with firepower, but fear. The next attack comes swift and brutal. A coordinated push on the west wing. Explosives shatter glass storefronts. 2 of the mercenaries come in through a breached delivery bay, moving fast, armor glinting under the red emergency lights. Eddie is ready. He's set tripwires through the service hallway, fishing line rigged with cans, firecrackers wrapped in metal tins to mimic gunfire. It throws the invaders off just long enough. He ambushes them from above, dropping from a balcony with the precision of someone who's done this far too often. One goes down, hard. The other flees, wounded. It's not a win. It's a delay. And time is the one thing Eddie's rapidly losing. In the chaos, Vance panics. He's convinced they're all going to die. He finds a side exit Eddie didn't know was accessible and tries to sneak out. Just him, no warning to the others, no plan. But Charlie's men are already covering the perimeter. As soon as Vance opens the door, he's met with the barrel of a rifle. They don't kill him. Not yet. They take him. And just like that, Charlie has a bargaining chip. The voice returns, over the mall's old intercom system, now hijacked. Come, cold. Charlie speaks like a man who's already won. He doesn't rage. Doesn't threaten. He invites. Tells Eddie he understands. Two soldiers on opposite ends of a war that doesn't exist anymore. He says he doesn't want blood, but he will spill it. Vance is the first. One of his fingers arrives in a plastic bag, slipped through the mail slot of the side door. Message received. But Eddie doesn't flinch. Instead, he prepares. He's not going to negotiate. He's going to end this. He sends Ruby and Johnny to relocate Jamie. The panic room in the mall manager's office, an old Cold War-era bunker repurposed as a storage closet, has a steel door and no exterior access. It's not perfect, but it's safer than the open floor. Johnny hacks the camera feeds to set up a loop. Ruby rigs decoys, mannequins dressed in guard uniforms, moving on makeshift pulleys, meant to draw fire. Eddie stays behind. Not because he wants to die, but because this isn't just about survival. It's about drawing Charlie in. The mercenaries return in waves now. No longer surgical. Now they're aggressive, sweeping corridors like they're in occupied territory. The mall's quiet charm is gone. It's a battlefield. Escalators jammed with debris. Food court tables turned into barricades. The carousel, once a whimsical centerpiece, now spins slowly, its lights flickering, casting monstrous shadows across the walls. In a fierce firefight near the loading dock, Mason, stoic, quiet Mason, takes a bullet to the stomach. It's quick. Ugly. Eddie drags him back behind a kiosk. There's no medic. No help. Just pressure and prayers. Mason looks at him, eyes fading. You were right to fight, he says. Then he's gone. Another man down. But the cost isn't just in blood. It's in morale. Johnny nearly breaks. Ruby wants to take Jamie and run, even if it means through enemy lines. Eddie stops them. Not with words. With presence. With the sheer weight of his will. He reminds them that if they run, Charlie wins. And if Charlie wins, Jamie dies. Because she's not just a witness. She's a verdict. And people like Charlie don't let truth live. Eddie devises a plan. It's reckless. Dangerous. But it's the only chance they have left. He turns on the mall's sprinkler system, flooding the ground floor with ankle-deep water. Then, he reroutes power from the generator to overload the circuit breakers. When Charlie's team pushes forward again, the hallways explode with sparks. Water meets wire. The lights cut. The air fills with smoke. Panic. Confusion. It's enough. Eddie takes down 3 more of them in the chaos. Silent. Precise. But it costs him. A ricochet catches his leg. He limps now, blood trailing behind him. And he knows Charlie is watching. The final confrontation is no longer a question. It's a promise. Eddie lures Charlie into the arcade, a place of bright colors and dead machines. It's symbolic, in a way. A place meant for laughter turned into a killing ground. Charlie enters calmly, gun in hand, not a mark on him. Immaculate. He looks at Eddie with something close to respect. Not admiration. Just acknowledgement. like two old wolves circling a shared wound. They talk. Not much. Just enough to make it hurt. Charlie explains how the girl's testimony will dismantle an empire. How many men will fall if she lives? How much order will crumble? He doesn't speak in evil. He speaks in balance. Pragmatism. Sacrifice. Eddie says nothing. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than bullets. Then they move. No finesse. No dramatic choreography. Just violence. Fast, messy, painful. Two men who know how to hurt. How to survive. Fists. Knives. Desperation. It ends not with triumph, but necessity. Eddie drives a broken pipe into Charlie's shoulder. They both collapse, breathing heavy. But Eddie gets up. Charlie doesn't. And just like that, the storm breaks. The lights flicker back. Sirens in the distance. The siege is over. Ruby emerges from the panic room with Jamie. Johnny limps through the food court, eyes wide, dazed but alive. What's left of the mall is smoke and ruin. But they won. Not because they were stronger, but because they were willing to stand. Jamie is safe. She'll testify. The machine behind Charlie will begin to crack. It won't fall all at once. But it will falter. And somewhere, in a courtroom lit by fluorescent lights and guarded by men in suits, her voice will echo louder than bullets ever could. Eddie, bleeding and exhausted, walks out into the morning light. No applause. No parade. Just breath. And somewhere deep inside, the quiet feeling that, maybe for once, he was exactly where he needed to be. Not to fight, but to protect. He walks into the story like a man who's been walking for years, alone, invisible, carrying the weight of a past that no one's asking about but that he can't put down. Eddie Deacon isn't introduced with fanfare or force. He enters quietly, not as a hero but as a man simply trying to keep moving. And that's the first thing you notice about him. Not what he says, but how little he needs to. Every moment with him speaks louder in silence. In a world where characters often announce themselves with drama, Eddie does so with a tired glance and a slow, deliberate breath. At first glance, he's just another worn-down veteran looking for work. Another face in the system. Another set of shoulders squared by duty and scarred by time. But the longer you watch, the clearer it becomes. Eddie's not broken in the way the world expects. He's fractured, but with precision. His past hasn't unmade him, it's carved him into something leaner, sharper. What he's lost hasn't hollowed him. It's honed him. That's what makes Eddie different. Because beneath the weary routine of his new security job lies the muscle memory of a man who once held command, who once moved through war zones not with bravado but with the quiet clarity of survival. He doesn't posture. He assesses. And when the storm hits, when violence crashes through the doors of that sleepy shopping mall, he doesn't panic. He just activates. The transformation isn't dramatic. No sudden shift. No slow-motion montage. He simply steps into his role like a man returning to an old uniform. It fits too well. And that's the tragedy of Eddie Deacon. He's never more alive than when everything is falling apart. But Eddie's strength isn't just in strategy or reflexes. It's in his restraint. He leads not through dominance, but through presence. The other guards, lost, panicked, untrained, they look to him not because he demands it, but because he earns it. He absorbs their fear, redirects their energy, teaches them how to see the mall not as a prison, but as terrain. And while others scream or collapse under pressure, Eddie speaks with calm precision. He's not without fear. He just knows what to do with it. His dynamic with Jamie is where we see the soul beneath the soldier. He doesn't bond with her through words. He doesn't try to comfort her with lies about safety or promise her everything will be okay. He looks at her and recognizes something. Not just fear, but resilience. She doesn't beg to be saved. She just needs someone who won't leave. And Eddie, for reasons he can't even articulate, decides that he'll be that someone. It's not about heroism. It's about redemption. Because Eddie's past is never spelled out in detail, but it hovers over him like a shadow. Maybe he lost men in combat. Maybe he made decisions that haunt him. Whatever it was, he's lived in the aftermath for years. And now, for one night, he's given a chance, not to rewrite history, but to make this moment matter. To protect one person. One innocent life. That's all he needs. Opposite him is Charlie, a character who moves like a cold wind, quiet, clinical, utterly certain. Charlie is the kind of antagonist who doesn't raise his voice because he doesn't need to. He knows exactly who he is. Exactly what he's capable of. And that certainty makes him terrifying. Where Eddie is all weary compassion and moral restraint, Charlie is mechanical efficiency. He doesn't operate from emotion. He calculates. He predicts. He manipulates. His mercenaries aren't thugs, they're tools. Each one sent with purpose, like chess pieces, not soldiers. And when his initial plan fails, he doesn't rage. He adjusts. That's Charlie's greatest strength, his ability to adapt. But that also becomes his blind spot. Because while he understands tactics and pressure, he underestimates conviction. He doesn't believe someone like Eddie, undertrained, underarmed, outnumbered, could stand against him. He assumes fear is universal. That when pushed hard enough, everyone breaks. But Eddie doesn't break. And that, more than any weapon, is what Charlie never planned for. Jamie, though, remains the true heart of the film. She's not your typical child in peril. She doesn't exist simply to be rescued. From the first moment she appears, she's in motion, running, calculating, surviving. She has seen too much, lost too much, and yet still somehow holds onto the thread of hope. Not in the world, perhaps, but in people. She doesn't trust easily, but when she does, it's not blind. It's earned. Her connection with Eddie isn't sentimental. It's forged in fire. She sees that he doesn't just want to save her, he needs to. And in that, they share something. She becomes the one thing that cuts through Eddie's numbness, the one thing he can't afford to fail. Not because he's a hero, but because she matters. In a world that's tried to forget him, she gives him a reason to remember who he was. The supporting characters orbit around this central triangle with varying levels of depth, but each contributes something essential. Ruby is more than just the sarcastic, street-smart team member. She's sharp in the ways the others aren't, socially aware, emotionally intuitive. She's the first to clock that Eddie's not just another rent-a-cop. She sees the weight he carries. And while she never fully steps into the warrior role, she evolves, fast. Her arc is one of rising courage, of finding strength she didn't know she had. Johnny is the most vulnerable, the least prepared. At first, he's comic relief, a twitchy presence glued to security monitors and nervously cracking jokes. But when the danger becomes real, when bullets replace bickering, Johnny learns something about fear. Not how to eliminate it, but how to live with it. He grows, not into a fighter, but into someone who tries. And in a siege like this, trying matters. Vance is the counterweight, the symbol of cowardice, of ego under pressure. He's the first to splinter. The one who wants out. The one who believes survival is about escape, not resistance. And his betrayal, while small, is significant. Because in a crisis, not everyone rises. Some collapse. Some choose themselves. His failure makes Eddie's resolve shine even brighter. Then there's Mason. The quiet one. The man who says little and sees much. He's the embodiment of all those who've been pushed to the margins, old, discarded, forgotten. But when the time comes, he steps forward. Not with speeches, not with swagger, but with presence. His death is the most human. the most mourned. Not because he was the strongest, but because he stood when it mattered. Together, these characters form more than a survival squad. They form a cross-section of ordinary people thrust into extraordinary circumstances. They don't all become heroes. They don't all make it. But they all matter. Because each choice, each failure, each flicker of courage adds to the weight of Eddie's mission. What makes these characters memorable isn't that they change the world. It's that they refuse to let the world change them. Eddie doesn't become something new by the end of the night. He becomes himself again. Jamie doesn't get her innocence back, but she reclaims her agency. Charlie doesn't fall with drama or spectacle. He falls because, in the end, he faced someone who believed. Not in systems. Not in orders. But in people. That belief, quiet, stubborn, unshakable, is the film's true spine. It's what elevates a simple siege into something meaningful. And when the dust settles, when the sun rises on broken glass and blood-stained tile floors, the survivors don't stand triumphant. They stand together. Changed. Scarred. But whole. Because in a world built to break them, they held on to the one thing no enemy could take. Each other. It all started with an empty mall. Not just a location. They could have filmed anywhere, but a real, functioning shopping center slated for demolition. Somewhere outside Sofia, Bulgaria, this aging retail space had been frozen in time. Storefronts still bore the names of long-forgotten franchises. Mannequins stood silently in shattered display windows. The escalators worked, but just barely. And the lights, when they flickered to life, felt more like a haunted house than a hub of commerce. When the production team first scouted it, there was only one response: this place doesn't need set design. It is the set. So began one of the strangest productions in the world of mid-budget action thrillers. By the time filming started, the team had transformed the derelict mall into a labyrinth of sound stages and battlegrounds. But what they didn't anticipate was how the mall itself would begin to act like a character. One not written into the script, but definitely present on set. Cast and crew reported odd occurrences. Lights switching on in locked sections, security gates rising without being triggered, doors opening at the wrong time. One day, during a rehearsal for a quiet, tension-heavy scene, a loud crash echoed from the upper level. Everyone froze. When they investigated, they found a wall-length mirror had shattered, completely on its own. No one touched it. No one was near it. It became a running joke: the mall doesn't like us filming at night. That might have just been local superstition. But then again, what's a good thriller without a little fear behind the scenes? The film's lead, Antonio Banderas, signed onto the project with little fanfare. He wasn't chasing awards or franchise glory. He took the role because he liked the simplicity of it. A man. A mission. A child in danger. No capes, no CGI. Just grit. And yet, it turned into one of the most physically demanding roles of his later career. Banderas did nearly all of his own stunts. Every sprint, every fall, every piece of close-quarters combat you see on screen, it's him. He trained for weeks with a military consultant, mastering not just the moves, but the mindset. He wanted Eddie Deacon to feel like someone who had once been elite but had since been worn down, like a knife left in the rain. His combat style in the film is not flashy. It's utilitarian. Efficient. You can see it in how he moves. He doesn't waste a single breath. And speaking of breath, there's a story about one of the film's most intense fight scenes that nearly never made it to the final cut. It takes place in a dimly lit storage area. Tight quarters, metal shelves, bad sight lines. During filming, the ventilation system failed, and the air inside became so stale and hot that crew members had to rotate out every 10 minutes. But Banderas refused. He stayed in the heat, performing take after take, soaked in sweat that wasn't from makeup. The result? A scene that feels suffocating. Real. You're not just watching him fight, you're struggling to breathe with him. Director Alain Desrochers brought a very specific vision to the project. Known primarily for slick action and stylized visuals, he surprised everyone by wanting this film to feel gritty. He banned cranes and drones for most shots. "The camera should never feel like it's floating," he said. "It should feel like it's crawling with them." Most of the film was shot handheld, with long lenses that forced the audience to peer into shadowed corners and blurred edges. If it felt like you were watching something you weren't supposed to see, that was intentional. But Desrochers had one indulgence, a secret obsession with 1980s action films. The team began spotting Easter eggs sprinkled throughout the set, a battered red payphone in the mall's hallway that looked suspiciously like the one from Die Hard, a flickering neon sign in the food court that read McTiernan Subs, a wink to director John McTiernan. Even the name E. Deacon is a quiet nod to the Terminator's Kyle Reese, another quiet soldier from nowhere who shows up just in time to save the innocent. Then there was the matter of the soundtrack. Originally, the film was going to feature a traditional orchestral score, tight, suspenseful, heavy on strings. But in post-production, something wasn't clicking. The music felt too polished, too clean. Desrochers made a radical decision. He scrapped most of the completed score and brought in a Bulgarian industrial sound artist known only as KIRR. Over 3 weeks, KIRR built a new score using field recordings from the actual mall. Creaking gates, hum of fluorescent lights, buzz from malfunctioning electronics. He layered them with low-frequency pulses and distorted percussion. The result? A score that doesn't play behind the action. It infects it. Some of the strangest stories from production involved the child actress who played Jamie. The young girl, whose name was deliberately withheld from marketing materials to preserve her privacy, was only 11 during filming but approached the role with a seriousness beyond her years. She insisted on rehearsing with the stunt team. During one scene, where she had to crawl through a narrow ventilation shaft, she refused a body double. The shaft was real. Metal. Dust-filled. She got stuck halfway through on the first take and panicked. But instead of cutting, Desrochers kept rolling. Her cries, her effort to push through, that's the footage you see in the final film. It's raw. And it's real. On set, she developed a bond with Banderas that went far beyond rehearsed chemistry. Between takes, he'd kneel down beside her, teach her lines in Spanish, and play little games to keep her energy up. "She reminded me," he later said in an interview, "why we fight. In every film, in every role, there's always something worth saving." A lesser-known fact about the mall location. It was once used during the Cold War as a civilian shelter. Beneath the food court, sealed behind rusted doors, there existed an underground section few crew members ever entered. When it was accidentally discovered during a location scout, Desrochers had it added into the script. That dark, claustrophobic storage wing where the final showdown takes place? It wasn't set design. It was real. They didn't even repaint it. And the eerie part? Every time someone went down there, the radio signals dropped. Another oddity involved the extras. Many of them were local Bulgarians who had never acted before. Some were shopkeepers. Some were students. A few were security guards in real life. Desrochers didn't want them trained. He wanted authentic reactions, real panic, real hesitation. In one scene, as the mercenaries stormed the mall, an extra was genuinely startled by a prop grenade that exploded too close to him. He ran off set screaming in Bulgarian. Rather than reshoot, they kept the footage. Subtitled it. It reads, "Not again." The film's armorer, a former Eastern European military officer, insisted on realism to the point of discomfort. The weapons, though modified for safety, were weighted to feel like the real thing. Actors struggled under the weight, especially during long takes. But the authenticity shows. None of the firefights look choreographed. They look desperate. Fatigued. Every shot fired looks like it cost something. And there was one final mystery. During a night shoot in the lower corridors, a camera operator noticed something strange in the footage. In the corner of the frame, only visible when paused, was a figure. Pale. Motionless. Standing behind a glass partition. No one had been there. It wasn't an extra. The area had been locked off. The crew joked it was the ghost of the mall. They reviewed the footage several times. The figure never blinked. Eventually, it was removed from the final cut. Maybe. No one quite remembers if it was actually deleted or just moved to another scene. And then, just like that, the filming ended. No major premiere. No glamorous red carpet. The movie was released quietly, digitally, almost like it snuck in through the back door of cinema. But for those who saw it, something stuck. Not because of its scale, but because of its sincerity. It wasn't trying to be bigger than life. It was just trying to show what happens when ordinary people are asked to be extraordinary. And somewhere in the shadows of that forgotten mall in Bulgaria, maybe a little of that truth still lingers. A door creaks open on its own. A radio buzzes with static. And if you listen carefully, you might just hear the footsteps of a soldier with nothing left to lose, still walking those silent halls. It opens on a quiet man and a flickering mall. No explosions. No chase. No sweeping score to announce the storm. Just a man walking through a world that doesn't seem to notice him, framed by hollow fluorescent lights and the hum of forgotten commerce. At first glance, the movie might look like another simple thriller, a basic siege story painted on the backdrop of a shopping center. But for those who stayed with it, who let the silence settle and the tension build, the story reveals something deeper. Something bruised. Something personal. Critics were slow to embrace it. On paper, it seemed modest. An aging soldier, a little girl, a team of mercenaries, and a mall. But look closer, and the simplicity becomes sharpness. A precision blade disguised as blunt force. And at the heart of that blade, cutting quietly, relentlessly, is Eddie Deacon. The first significant event, from a thematic point of view, isn't the gunfire or the ambush. It's Eddie's job interview. A small scene. Understated. Forgettable, even. But it speaks volumes. Here is a man who once led with certainty, now reduced to waiting in a plastic chair, hoping for a paycheck. When asked about experience, he doesn't brag. He doesn't oversell. He just says he served. That he's capable. But what you hear in his voice is a man trying to convince himself that the world still has a use for him. And when he's handed a security uniform, it's not triumph. It's resignation. This quiet desperation is what grounds the entire film. Critics who praised the film often pointed to this tonal restraint. In an era bloated with spectacle, the film leans on character. On presence. And this choice gives the action that follows real weight. When Jamie bursts into the story, bloodied and breathless, it isn't just the arrival of a plot device. It's the moment the film reveals its true nature. Because this isn't about one man saving a girl. It's about two people trying not to be erased. Jamie is not portrayed as a helpless victim. She is terrified, yes. But she's also alert. Brave. Holding secrets in her silence. And when she locks eyes with Eddie for the first time, it's not trust that passes between them, it's recognition. Two souls abandoned by the systems meant to protect them. Critics saw this as the emotional core of the film. The siege that follows, the quiet dismantling of the mall security, the subtle encroachment of Charlie's mercenaries, is where the narrative sharpens. What makes this sequence more than genre convention is how it's presented. There's no sweeping overview of the villain's plan. No heavy exposition. Just quiet infiltration. Cameras go dark. Power fails. Doors unseal. And Eddie reacts. The critical perspective here is rooted in response versus reaction. Eddie doesn't panic. He responds. He assesses. He organizes. This distinction becomes thematic. He is not just a man fighting back. He is reclaiming control in a world that stripped him of it. Charlie, the antagonist, enters not with violence, but with a calm voice over the intercom. This, critics noted, was one of the film's more chilling choices. His power lies not in physicality, but in ease. He speaks like a surgeon, slicing through fear with a scalpel of logic. Give us the girl. Nobody gets hurt. It's a performance of civility, and it works because the film never paints him as monstrous. It paints him as inevitable. The face of modern violence, calculated, corporate, and always just one call away from being sanctioned. What happens next is the film's first major turning point. Eddie chooses to resist. And here, the theme crystallizes. This is not a story of vengeance. It is not justice. It is resistance. When Eddie locks the doors, when he arms the others, when he turns a mall into a battlefield, he's not becoming a hero. He's becoming whole. And this subtle inversion was not lost on critics. Many compared it to westerns, where broken men find purpose in protecting towns they don't belong to. Others saw echoes of Die Hard, but with less quips and more quiet desperation. The film's pacing, slow burn, methodical, unhurried, divided viewers. Some saw it as lack of momentum, but others, particularly in more thoughtful circles, saw it as a refusal to pander. Every beat was earned. Every ambush, every counterattack, came from a place of necessity, not spectacle. He is not heroic. He does not die saving anyone. He simply doesn't move fast enough. It's brutal, unceremonious, and it lands hard. Because in real life, people don't get to choose when the bullet finds them. His absence becomes a quiet drumbeat that follows Eddie through the rest of the film. A reminder that survival has a cost. Charlie's games escalate. Taunts over the radio. Psychological pressure. And Eddie begins to fray. But he never snaps. That restraint, his ability to stay calm under fire, becomes symbolic. Critics called it a portrait of PTSD inverted. Most films show trauma through breakdowns. This one shows it through control. Eddie doesn't scream. He doesn't cry. He survives. And that, paradoxically, becomes the most heartbreaking thing about him. He knows how to endure. He just doesn't know how to heal. The final act unfolds with increasing urgency. The mall, once a static location, becomes dynamic. It moves with the characters. The carousel spins eerily. The food court becomes a last stand. Elevators are used as traps. And in every nook, the film pushes its characters to the edge. When Charlie finally enters face to face, it's not an action climax. It's a philosophical confrontation. They don't just fight. They speak. Charlie justifies. Eddie listens. And what passes between them is not rage. It's sorrow. They are both soldiers. Both instruments. But one chose to become the weapon. The other chose to protect. This dynamic drew particular praise from critics who expected a stock villain. Instead, they found a ghost. Charlie is not cruel because he enjoys it. He is cruel because he sees it as necessary. That belief, cool, clinical, is what makes him truly frightening. And Eddie's refusal to mirror that belief is what makes him the emotional core. The final blow is not about muscle. It's about conviction. And when Eddie wins, it doesn't feel like a triumph. It feels like survival. It feels like he's just barely crossed a finish line, carrying a weight that no one will ever see. The ending is quiet. Jamie is safe. The mall is wrecked. And Eddie walks into the dawn, not redeemed, but present. Still wounded. Still alone. But alive. That silence, that refusal to indulge in a soaring score or an emotional monologue, is what gives the story its staying power. It ends as it began, with a man walking through a world that doesn't notice him. But now, we do. In terms of reception, the film was a slow burn. It didn't ignite the box office. But it lingered. Found its audience in late-night streaming sessions, in quiet recommendations between people who wanted something real. It became a cult favorite among veterans groups. A film passed around by those who saw themselves not in the firefights, but in the quiet in between. Because ultimately, the film isn't about the siege. It's about endurance. About the kind of strength that doesn't roar, but stays. That kind of story doesn't always shout its brilliance. It whispers it. And sometimes, those are the stories we remember longest. It began not on a glamorous soundstage in Los Angeles, not with green screens or glitzy trailers, but in the dim shadow of an abandoned shopping mall on the outskirts of Sofia, Bulgaria. From the moment the production team stepped inside, they knew they weren't building a world, they were stepping into one already forgotten. This wasn't just a filming location, it was a place that had aged out of relevance. Escalators grown from disuse, dust clung to the air like memory, and faded sale signs still hung in storefronts like ghosts of a more cheerful time. It was eerie. It was perfect. And it would become the soul of a movie that whispered its story through grit, flickering light, and the silence between footsteps. The decision to shoot on location rather than construct elaborate sets was more than just a budget choice, it was a creative philosophy. Director Alain Desrochers wanted immersion. He didn't want actors to pretend. He wanted them to feel the corridors beneath their boots, to sweat under real emergency lighting, to breathe in the damp air of forgotten consumerism. The mall they chose was not a functioning commercial space. It had been scheduled for demolition. For months it had stood empty, collecting dust and strange echoes. Its bones were still intact, but the power was erratic, and some of the upper floors were deemed unstable. The crew worked around the hazards. Some rooms had to be sealed off. Others were reinforced. But much of what you see on screen, the broken tiles, the grime-streaked glass, the long empty food court, was real. There were moments, crew members said, where the line between set and reality blurred so deeply they forgot they were making a movie. Antonio Banderas, who stepped into the role of Eddie Deacon with a quiet intensity, was drawn to that realism. He wasn't interested in CGI explosions or a mountain of stunt doubles. He wanted something raw, something human, and that meant getting his hands dirty. He trained for weeks prior to filming, not just physically, but tactically. The filmmakers brought in former military consultants to teach Banderas how to move like someone who had once led squads through hostile zones but had since slipped into civilian silence. It wasn't about aggression. It was about economy. Every movement had to feel like a muscle memory. Worn, automatic, born of necessity. Banderas insisted on doing nearly all of his stunts. There's a particular hallway fight, midway through the film, where his character dismantles two intruders using only a flashlight, a fire extinguisher, and a doorframe. That fight was rehearsed in silence for 3 days. No music. No dialogue. Just the rhythm of contact. And when they finally shot it, Banderas performed every move in a single take. The bruises on his knuckles in that scene? Not makeup. There's another story from the same hallway one night. During setup for a nighttime ambush scene, the lights inexplicably cut out. The emergency backups failed to trigger. The mall was plunged into total darkness. Crew members, already accustomed to the structure's quirks, laughed it off, until they realized that one camera had continued to roll. When they reviewed the footage later, they found something odd. For roughly 8 seconds, a shape moved past the frame. Tall, slow, not part of the scene. Everyone was accounted for. No one could identify the silhouette. Desrochers reportedly watched the clip, paused, and said, "Leave it in. The mall's telling its own story." But the production wasn't all tension and mystery. In fact, the cast and crew bonded quickly. Filming mostly overnight, they developed a strange camaraderie built on vending machine dinners, midnight rehearsals, and group walks through darkened corridors to kill time between setups. They had a dartboard taped to an old 50% off sign in one of the abandoned shops, and it became a kind of ritual. Hit the bullseye, and you earned a free energy drink from the catering cart. Liam McIntyre, who played Charlie, the mercenary leader, approached his role with icy calm on screen, but off-camera, he was a different man entirely. Known for his prankster energy, he once replaced the contents of the weapons cache prop with Nerf blasters. The stunt team walked in to begin the day's shoot and found themselves in a surprise foam dart war that lasted nearly half an hour. Desrochers let it continue. "Better they get the energy out now," he said. "They'll need it later." That stunt team, by the way, became an integral part of the production's DNA. Many were local Bulgarian martial artists and performers with experience in European cinema. They brought with them an improvisational style that lent an edge to the film's combat. Rather than tightly choreographed sequences, many of the fights were built from loose frameworks, plans that allowed the actors and stunt performers to respond naturally, to evolve with the space around them. It meant more risk, but it also meant more authenticity. One particularly ambitious stunt nearly went off the rails. In a climactic scene, Eddie is forced to slide down a collapsing escalator while fire bursts from the adjacent corridor. The fire was real, controlled, of course, but real. The heat was so intense that camera equipment began to overheat mid-take. Banderas made the slide anyway. When he reached the bottom, crew members rushed in with fire blankets, thinking something had gone wrong. He waved them off. "That's what it should feel like," he said. "Panic. Real panic." Production designer Alexander Dragunov deserves credit for crafting the visual language of the film without altering the bones of the mall. He worked with what was already there. He repurposed furniture, added lighting only where absolutely necessary, and used natural deterioration as part of the aesthetic. In one scene, a jewelry kiosk becomes a barricade. The glass cases? Already cracked before filming. The watches inside? Leftover stock from the mall's final open week. "We didn't set dress," Dragunov said. "We discovered the set." There was, of course, a more technical side to the production as well. Sound design was particularly intricate. With so many scenes shot in echo-heavy spaces, capturing clean dialogue was a nightmare. Boom mics had to be suspended from makeshift rails that followed the actors through the mall. Sometimes, dialogue had to be looped in post. But rather than clean up every line, Desrochers made a controversial decision. He kept some of the ambient imperfections. "If the mall is alive," he explained, "then it should be breathing." That breathing became part of the score. Composer Todd Bryanton layered subtle pulses into the background of the film, low thuds, distant clangs, rhythmic hums. Many came from recordings captured late at night, when the mall was silent except for the creaks and groans of its structure settling. These were blended into the music, giving each scene an underlying tension you might not consciously notice, but your body feels. One of the most poignant moments in the film, a quiet conversation between Eddie and Jamie in the dark, wasn't even in the original script. It was born from a night where filming ran behind, and the young actress playing Jamie, whose real name remains intentionally unpublicized for privacy, was feeling overwhelmed. Banderas sat with her between takes, listening, talking. Desrochers, observing from a distance, had cameras roll quietly. The exchange became part of the final cut. It wasn't rehearsed. It was just two people, in the dark, trying to understand the world around them. As production wrapped, the crew held a small farewell party, not in a hotel ballroom, but in the mall itself. They set up candles throughout the food court, turned on the carousel one last time, and watched as the flickering lights spun through the shadows. Banderas gave a short speech, standing on an overturned bench. He didn't talk about stunts or scripts. He talked about space. "This place," he said, "was more than a location. It gave us a heartbeat. You could feel it. The walls, the floor, the dark corners. We didn't create anything. We just listened to what was already here." They left the mall a few days later. Within 6 weeks, demolition crews began tearing it down. What remains of that space now is only captured in the frames of the film, a ghost mall turned battleground, a forgotten ruin that held a story within its bones. A story about endurance, protection, and redemption. And the strange, beautiful irony? The movie that told the tale of overlooked people standing tall was made in a place the world had already forgotten. Sometimes, the best stories hide in the silence. And sometimes, all they need is a camera, a crew, and a man with a flashlight walking through the dark, waiting for the next scene to begin. It begins with quiet steel and forgotten glass. A mall. Just a mall. On paper, nothing special. Not the sleek, modern kind with towering skylights and designer stores. This one is smaller. Older. Its bones creak under the weight of time. Its lights hum with the flickering fatigue of age. There's a kind of dust that settles in places like this, not just on surfaces, but in the air itself. As if the building breathes old air, exhales memory. A relic of a world that moved on without waiting. This is where the story unfolds. It's not a city under siege. Not a jungle battlefield. Not a vast desert wasteland. Just one enclosed space with locked doors, shuttered storefronts, empty hallways that twist and echo. And that choice, to tell a story within a place so confined, so ordinary, was deliberate. The mall isn't just a setting. It becomes the film's central stage, its emotional canvas, and in many ways, its silent antagonist. From the very first shot of Eddie walking its long corridors, you can feel it. The mall is asleep. The lights are dimmed, the music long silenced. Stores sit dark with mannequins standing in lifeless poses, remnants of a cheerier past. Food court tables are perfectly aligned, untouched, sterile. Security cameras twitch slightly, scanning nothing but stillness. And yet, the space feels anything but peaceful. It feels like it's waiting. The mall is isolated, geographically and emotionally. Located just far enough from anything resembling help, it becomes a vacuum when the siege begins. There's no cavalry coming. No neighbors to hear the screams. No passers-by to stumble upon the chaos. This isolation becomes one of the most powerful tools the film uses to create tension. There's no outside world. There is only inside. The walls trap everyone. Every corner becomes a question mark. Every sound, amplified. When Jamie first bangs on the security door, rain-soaked and terrified, she's not just seeking shelter. She's seeking sanctuary. And the mall, cold and indifferent, gives nothing. It is Eddie's decision to open that door, his choice, that animates the space. From then on, the mall is no longer inert. It becomes reactive. Hostile. The layout plays like a labyrinth. Long corridors that lead to dead ends. Side entrances that betray their supposed security. Loading bays with too many exits. Elevators that creak slowly, promising escape but delivering nowhere. Every location within the mall serves a narrative purpose. The toy store, with its cheerful colors and plastic soldiers, becomes a tragic echo of the violence to come. The storage rooms, dim and cluttered, offer temporary shelter but little safety. Even the roof, seemingly a path to freedom, is just another trap, another box with 4 walls and no answers. Cinematographer Boyan Bazelli approaches this space not like a traditional action set, but like a psychological maze. His camera rarely soars. It doesn't sweep or fly or spin. It crawls. It watches. Often it sits low, capturing feet and shadows before it dares to reveal a face. Or it lurks behind objects, glass counters, half-shuttered gates, giving the impression that the building itself is spying. This perspective transforms the mall into a predator. During the early scenes, the lighting is flat and cool. Fluorescent bulbs cast a pale, artificial glow. The shadows are soft, the danger hidden. But once the mercenaries breach, once the power goes out and the red emergency lights flicker to life, the entire visual language changes. The mall becomes an organism. Its veins glow red. Its silence deepens. And within this new skin, every shot begins to pulse. It's in this red-hued half-light that the mall becomes most alive. Reflections in shop windows shimmer with threat. Silhouettes drift behind storefront displays. The line between hunter and hunted blurs in each frame. And yet, Bazzelli never lets the darkness become aesthetic. It's functional. It forces the viewer to search the frame, to lean in, to participate. This tension, this visual uncertainty, becomes the heartbeat of the film. Color plays a crucial role in tone. During moments of calm or planning, the tones shift toward cooler hues, deep blues, muted grays, cold greens from flickering monitors. These are moments of breath. Pause. But the moment chaos returns, gunfire, a chase, a reveal, the palette shifts instantly. Red, yellow, orange. Sudden heat. There's one especially haunting sequence that illustrates this perfectly. Eddie, moving through a dark corridor, hears something. Not a scream. Just breath. The camera doesn't show the source. Instead, it clings to his shoulder as he rounds each corner. The only light is from an emergency exit sign flickering intermittently above. It flashes red, then dies, then red again. For a moment, the hallway is empty. Then it isn't. This use of rhythm in lighting mimics a pulse. And the entire film seems to breathe with that same unsettling rhythm. Set design, too, plays a vital role. The art department didn't overdress the mall. In fact, the choice was to underdress. To leave most things exactly as they were. Store names remain faded. Posters are curled and yellowed. Product displays look neglected. This realism grounds the story. It never feels like a movie set. It feels like a place that has quietly decayed. A place no one cared about anymore, until suddenly, for one night, it became the center of everything. And while most of the action unfolds in tight, closed interiors, the film uses verticality brilliantly. Characters climb to upper levels, looking down on vast atriums like prisoners studying the shape of their cage. At times, the mall feels almost cathedral-like. Sacred. Desecrated. A place once meant for community, now hollowed into a crucible for violence and survival. Sound design reinforces this claustrophobia. There's no sweeping score to carry the film. Instead, there are hums. Echoes. The distant buzz of overhead lights. Footsteps that slap against tile and then vanish. The heavy slam of a door 2 corridors away. Gunshots echo forever. Radios crackle with interference. It's all grounded. Everything sounds too real. And in that realism lies the fear. One particularly brilliant choice was the decision to let silence linger. In most thrillers, the temptation is to fill gaps with music. Here, the gaps are the music. Eddie crawling behind a perfume counter, every breath loud in the stillness. Jamie holding her breath inside a maintenance closet as footsteps pass by outside. These moments aren't just tense, they're sacred. They give the audience room to feel. And then there's the carousel. It spins only once. Just once. Toward the final act, in the middle of a firefight, someone triggers it. The lights come on. The music begins, tinny, distorted, haunting. Horses bob up and down as shadows flicker across their painted eyes. In that moment, the film transcends its genre. It becomes something mythic. Innocence lost. War in a playground. It's a visual poem in the middle of chaos. This blend of realism and metaphor is what elevates the film beyond simple action. Even the practical elements serve dual purpose. The use of limited camera rigs forces actors to stay in character longer. Takes are extended. There's a rawness to their performances because they're truly navigating the space. There's no cut-to-reaction shot. The camera just stays, watches, judges. And this voyeuristic stillness turns the viewer into part of the mall, just another observer in the dark. The escalators become symbols too. In one scene, Eddie rides one down slowly, bleeding, gun in hand, knowing what waits below. The escalator moves mechanically, uncaring. He doesn't step off. He just rides, straight into the fire. It's not dramatized. There's no slow motion. Just a man descending. Accepting. Becoming. At the climax, when fire roars through the lower levels, the flames light up what's left of the mall like stained glass. Reflections ripple across the floor. Smoke twists in the air like ghosts. And through it, Eddie staggers forward, not victorious, but finished. The mall is scorched. The glass is broken. The silence returns. In the end, it's just a building. Just a space. But within it, something happened. Something permanent. And that's the magic of setting when it's treated not as a backdrop, but as a soul. This wasn't just a story told in a mall. It was a story about a mall. A place meant to be safe, empty, disposable. That, for one night, became the last line of defense between a child and oblivion. And now, even in its cinematic ruins, it stands. Not as a monument, but as a memory. Flickering. Waiting. Still watching. It began with a cold draft and an open mall. Not the kind where customers filed in for weekend deals or teenagers lingered by food courts, but an emptied husk of a once bustling commercial space somewhere on the outskirts of Sofia, Bulgaria. The place had been closed for years. The stores were empty, the glass smudged with dust that had settled like ash, the ceiling tiles warped from moisture. But to the production crew, to the director Alain Desrochers and his team, it wasn't just a derelict building. It was a goldmine of atmosphere. A ready-made character. A living, breathing space that carried its own scars. The idea was simple. Film an action thriller in a real location, avoid synthetic studio sets, and let the space itself dictate the mood. But the execution? That was something else entirely. From day one, the cast and crew realized that this wouldn't be an ordinary shoot. There were no soundproofed walls, no backlit comforts. Just a dark, sprawling mall filled with creaking elevators, questionable wiring, and corners that seemed to whisper back when no one was speaking. The location itself became both a gift and a challenge, helping create an atmosphere of gritty realism while constantly testing their patience. Antonio Banderas arrived early. He didn't need to. The schedule had him arriving closer to the first day of principal photography, but he wanted to walk the space. To understand its rhythm. He explored the corridors alone, without a camera, long before the crew was ready to roll. He wanted to feel what Eddie Deacon might have felt, isolated, exhausted, quietly watchful. And it showed. Even in the earliest takes, Banderas moved like a man who knew every corner of that mall. Every echo. Every door. The rest of the cast quickly fell into rhythm with him. Liam McIntyre, who played the merciless and calculating Charlie, would go method between takes, not in an intense or cold way, but by drifting to the edges of the set, watching others without announcing himself. The tension it created was unspoken. Even in lunch breaks, his presence carried a strange weight, as if he were always calculating. When one of the crew joked about this, Liam laughed and admitted, "I'm just cold and looking for a warmer corner. But if it adds to the mood, I'll take it." The mall was not heated. That was never part of the plan. Filming mostly took place at night and during winter. So the cold wasn't just acting, it was real. You could see actors' breath in the air in certain scenes. Their teeth really chattered when the wind whipped through broken doors and ventilation shafts. The crew wore coats between takes. Space heaters were scattered in certain areas, but they were noisy and had to be shut off during filming, which meant scenes were often shot in frigid silence. One night, during a late shoot in the mall's upper levels, the cast and crew were deep into a tense action sequence when the lights flickered. Not as part of the lighting setup, this was real. An electrical fault. Power to the entire block sputtered. The emergency lights in the mall kicked in, bathing the entire space in an eerie red glow. The strange part? The scene they were filming was supposed to take place under red emergency lights. So they kept rolling. With just battery-powered cameras and backup rigs, the crew captured some of the most haunting footage in the film that night. The panic wasn't scripted, but it didn't have to be. Banderas leaned into the chaos. The lighting techs improvised. The camera team shifted positions by instinct alone. It wasn't until much later, reviewing dailies, that Desrochers realized they had captured something raw. "You couldn't storyboard that," he said. "You couldn't fake it. The mall just gave it to us." That kind of serendipity wove its way through production. One of the film's more emotional moments, when Eddie bandages Jamie's wounds using items from a mall kiosk, was almost cut for time. It wasn't even in the original script. But the chemistry between Banderas and the young actress was so potent that Desrochers kept the cameras rolling after their scene had technically ended. In the silence that followed, she looked up at him and said, "You're not like the other grown-ups." Banderas, unscripted, responded, "I've forgotten how to be one." That exchange made it into the final cut. Their relationship off-camera was just as genuine. Though she remained out of the spotlight and interviews due to her age and privacy, the young actress became the heart of the set. Crew members referred to her as La Pequeña, Spanish for the little one, because of the way Banderas doted on her. Between takes, he would sit with her and help her memorize lines in both English and Spanish. They played card games in the green room. She gave him a friendship bracelet made from pieces of the set, bits of costume string, beads from a busted kiosk display. He wore it under his wrist guard for the entire shoot. There were challenges, too. Many. The mall's elevators were unreliable. They worked during location scouting but broke down within the first week of shooting. In one scene, a crew member got stuck between floors while moving equipment. The fire department had to be called. From that point on, all elevator scenes were either faked or shot stationary with simulated movement added later. Still, the incident added to the production's mythos. Some swore the mall ate people who stayed too long in certain wings. Then there was the raccoon. At one point during filming, a wild raccoon somehow made its way into the mall through a duct system. It disrupted a scene by skittering across the food court mid-take. The actors stayed in character. The raccoon did not. It climbed a popcorn machine and stared down the production assistant assigned to remove it. The footage exists somewhere, an impromptu addition to the siege that wasn't quite on brand. It was eventually lured out with peanut butter. Even with all this chaos, there was a strange calm among the crew. Perhaps it was the nature of the story, claustrophobic, high stakes, intimate. Perhaps it was the set itself, with its shadowed edges and endless corridors, making the real world feel far away. But everyone, grips, makeup, lighting, catering, moved like they were part of a bigger rhythm. Like they weren't just filming a movie, but navigating a shared secret. Every night, after the final take, the team would gather in the old food court. They'd sit on plastic chairs pulled from busted diners, drink cheap coffee, and talk about what had gone right, what had gone wrong. Someone brought a small Bluetooth speaker one night and played classical music. It became tradition. As the camera gear was packed up and the props reset, you could hear strings and piano echoing off the marble floors, drifting into the darkness. On the last day of shooting, they filmed the scene where Eddie walks out of the mall into the first light of dawn. It was early, bitter cold, real sunrise. Banderas walked slowly, unscripted, coat wrapped tight, posture heavy. There were no more lines. Just that walk. That breath. And as the cameras rolled, the entire crew stood behind them in silence. No one shouted, "Cut." He just kept walking until he vanished beyond the frame. When he returned, the cast and crew applauded, not loudly, not theatrically. Just hands meeting in a rhythm that said, "We did it." The final wrap gift was a piece of tile from the mall's original flooring, wrapped in cloth and handed to each department head. A reminder of where they had been, what they had endured, and what they had made together. Most of the crew never returned to that mall again. It was demolished not long after. But those who were there remember it, not just for the cold or the flickering lights or the long nights, but for the way the building came alive when the cameras rolled. The way it breathed their story, held it. Because in the end, it wasn't just the set of a film. It was the vessel of a journey. One made by people who came with nothing but ideas and walked away with something real. Something captured in every whisper of wind through those broken windows. Every shadow that stretched across the floor. And every step that Antonio Banderas took in the dark. It begins not with words, but with a door. A heavy metal security door, quietly shut against the night, sealed not with pride or certainty, but with fatigue. On one side, the world spins on, chaotic, indifferent, blistered with ambition. On the other, a man leans against silence, holding it closed not because he believes he can win, but because he knows someone must try. That door, ordinary, gray, barely noticed, is the first and clearest symbol in a film layered with quiet metaphors and thematic echoes. It's a threshold, a line between safety and danger, between resignation and resistance. And it's exactly where the film finds its voice, not in grand speeches or sweeping gestures, but in the muted spaces between survival and surrender. At its core, this story is about protection. Not in the heroic, glorified way, but in the raw, unadorned form that real life demands. A former Marine named Eddie Deacon, worn down by time and failed systems, takes a job as a night security guard in a place long past its glory. He doesn't wear a cape. He wears tired boots, a name tag, and the weight of unspoken regret. He doesn't seek redemption. He just wants to feel useful again. But when a frightened child appears at the edge of his routine, chased by something bigger and colder than violence itself, that quiet purpose is shaken awake. And suddenly, protection becomes not just his duty, but his only reason to keep breathing. This theme, the desperate urge to protect something fragile, is explored through every action Eddie takes. His movements aren't about vengeance or heroism. They're about defiance. Not against the villains, but against the void. The emptiness of a world that discards people like him and children like her. The mall itself becomes a vital part of that thematic weight. A symbol of decay, of consumerism long past its prime. Once a place of comfort and convenience, it now stands hollow, forgotten. Its mannequins still pose in dusty windows. Its food court chairs remain stacked in neat, useless rows. It is, in essence, a reflection of Eddie, once useful, now overlooked. A place made for crowds, now echoing with ghosts. And yet, within its dead walls, life resists. As the siege begins, the mall transforms. What was once hollow becomes a fortress. Its escalators, stairwells, and storefronts become weapons. A landscape of mundanity forged into battleground. Herein lies one of the film's central symbols, repurposing. Just as Eddie rediscovers his ability to lead, to fight, the mall itself is reborn, not as a shrine to commerce, but as a crucible of survival. Everything abandoned becomes useful again. Even people. This connects to another major theme woven quietly into the script, redemption without forgiveness. Eddie isn't a man looking for applause. He isn't trying to fix what he broke or be forgiven for what he's done. He simply wants to make sure this one child, this one life, doesn't end up as forgotten as he is. That focus tightens the emotional thread of the story. Jamie isn't just a child in peril. She's the embodiment of innocence under siege. Not just by violence, but by the indifference of power. She doesn't cry often. She doesn't beg. Her trauma has muted her, but not erased her strength. She is small, yes. Fragile. But she's also a mirror. Every adult she meets is reflected in her expression. and what they see there determines who they become. Eddie sees a chance to protect. Charlie, the antagonist, sees a loose thread to be cut. Charlie himself is more than just a villain. He is the manifestation of systemic evil, not loud or unhinged, but composed, professional, surgical. He doesn't hate Jamie. He doesn't fear Eddie. He simply operates with precision. His calmness isn't a mask, it's his nature. Violence isn't emotional for him. It's transactional. And that's what makes him terrifying. He symbolizes a world where empathy has been replaced by efficiency, where people are assets or liabilities. And when he talks about Jamie, it's always in the language of problems and solutions. That cold, clinical view contrasts deeply with Eddie's warmth. One man sees life as cost, the other as worth. This dichotomy builds a deeper theme, the fight for humanity in a dehumanized world. Throughout the film, every character is faced with a moment where they must choose whether to act out of survival or out of principle. Vance, the head of mall security, chooses cowardice. Mason, the old ex-cop, chooses sacrifice. Ruby, the sharp-tongued guard, chooses courage she didn't know she had. Even Johnny, the jittery tech guy, finds his spine. These aren't transformations. They're awakenings. Reminders that decency isn't born of training or toughness. It's born of choice. Symbolism flows heavily through the mall's design. The carousel, which spins eerily during one of the most intense shootouts, becomes a chilling symbol of lost innocence. Once a place of joy, it now spins slowly in the red glow of emergency lights, its painted horses bobbing through the chaos. The music, warped and crackling, plays like a funeral march. It's the past circling back. A reminder that even places built for laughter can become arenas of pain. Light and color are used with surgical precision. The film begins in sterile blues and dull grays, emotionally muted, visually cold. But as danger creeps in, the palette shifts. Reds dominate. Not the warm red of comfort, but the harsh, clinical red of alarm systems and blood. When Jamie hides in a stockroom with flickering red light, it's not just tension. It's symbolism. The world is warning her, and no one is listening. And in that, we find another recurring theme, the failure of systems. Jamie is supposed to be protected by the government. The system. The convoy that was transporting her was supposed to be safe. But it failed. The very structure designed to protect her instead became the first to break. And so, she turns not to institutions, but to a man no one else would trust, an ex-Marine working night shift in a forgotten mall. The film makes this point over and over. It isn't systems that save us. It's people. Eddie isn't powerful. He's not wealthy. He has no resources beyond instinct, discipline, and will. But when faced with a moment that could have been easy, handing Jamie over and walking away, he stands. And that act of resistance reverberates through every moment that follows. It's not just about fighting back. It's about saying, no more. This theme is mirrored in the smaller arcs as well. Ruby finds her voice. Johnny finds his nerve. Even Jamie, who begins as silent and guarded, eventually speaks, not with volume, but with clarity. Her decision to trust Eddie isn't shown in a grand gesture. It's in a look, a moment, a shared silence. And in that quiet, we understand, trust doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be earned. Perhaps one of the most powerful symbols in the film is the surveillance system. Early in the story, the mall's security cameras are used to monitor harmless activity. Teenagers skateboarding. Late-night cleaners. But as the siege unfolds, the very system meant to provide oversight is turned against them. Charlie taps into the cameras. Uses them. Watches. Predicts. Suddenly, the watchers are watched. The symbol here is chilling. Technology, even when designed for safety, can become a tool of control in the wrong hands. The screens meant to give Eddie an advantage instead betray him. And in a climactic moment, he rips the cords from the monitors, not because he's giving up, but because he's choosing instinct over reliance. Connection over detachment.